Mi smo more krvi prolili za bratstvo i jedinstvo naših
građani. Agresija je završena. Mir je nadvladao.
Hoće gospodin Karadžić više niko, neće više niko možda u Srpsku.
Republika Hrvatska proglašuje.
Nemojte da mislite da nećete odvesti Bosnu i Hercegovinu u pakao.
Hello, all listeners, and it's fantastic to hear you. You can hear that I'm speaking English again. It's not our usual language, but it's the language we are using now during our interview season. Last time we spoke with Filip Ilanković, who explained something about the latest protests in Serbia and how they are heating up. But today it's different topic, but still from Western Balkans, obviously, and from the neighbor of Serbia, or we can say it's still part of Serbia. It depends on the perspective. And our guest today, who will be speaking on the topic, is Árpád Párdcz. It's fantastic to be here with you. So introduce yourself. I will not speak for you. You know yourself much better than I do.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for the invitation. So briefly about myself, I'm a PhD candidate at Corvinus University of Budapest, and before this I worked at the Migration Research Institute, the Institute of Strategic Studies, and the Hungarian Institute for Foreign Affairs. And during all this time and all these institutions, I covered the Western Balkans, basically foreign policy, defense policy, and also the inner workings and inner policy changes. So let's pick up.
Yes, you're absolutely the guy to do this with. I don't know why we haven't had you on our podcast until now. There are not too many Balkan experts in our area, I would say in Central Europe, and real experts. I mean, a lot of people comment on the Western Balkans, but not into too much depth. Let's get really deep. Let's talk about Kosovo and the current political dynamics in Kosovo. There were elections in Kosovo. It was last year already.
February.
That was this February, and there is a crisis which hasn't been resolved yet. Can you explain how did it happen? What were the election results and some background information into Kosovo politics?
Yes, so basically since Kosovo gained independence in 2008, the political side or political positions of the country can resemble with one word, and it's fractured. Basically, there are too many small parties covering up the field, and there are limited options to compromise and to form a coalition. And even weirder or even more interesting, the last government managed to fill out its 4-year runtime was the last one with Albin Kurti and his movement Vetëvendosje. But in this election, we can see that they only get 42% of the vote, so they don't have the majority to form a government. And the established parties like the Democratic League of Kosovo and the Democratic Party of Kosovo and even the Social Democrats or Liberals don't want to work with them most of the times. Even they try to get the majority in the Prevedie, which is the Kosovar parliament, and it has 120 places, but by incorporating the minority lists, because 100 seats are reserved for the Kosovar politicians and 20 is reserved for the minorities. And also in the minorities, the Srpska lista, the Serb list, holds the most power with 9 seats, but they are excluded from founding the government with Albin Kurti. And this time Kurti tried to work with all the other minorities and his party, the Vetëvendosje, the self-determination in English, and they fell short 3 seats to form a majority, so they tried to reach out, but none party wanted to work with him or work with them in his terms. And most of the times the problem is so big that even the Speaker of the House of the Prevedie cannot be elected, because she is the current acting Minister of Justice, who is heavily criticized by anybody outside of her own party. So it's went down 54 times without a finished vote. So even the Constitutional Court had to step in and give a 30-day mandate to try to form a government and to elect Speaker of the House, and they failed it because it passed on last month, and now they issued another 30 days period, but they said that this same person for the post cannot be elected or cannot be put forward more than 3 times. So it's really interesting how the current government, which is in an acting capacity, will try to handle this pressure and maybe select a new candidate to gain wider approval, because there is much pressure from the Kosovar electorate and also from the Western partners to form a government and break out from this political deadlock. But most of the times I would say the only real possibility is an early election, which only can be called by the president.
Yes, and how does the country run? What are the effects on the... Well, Kosovo has its problems, obviously, and has this made them worse, or people haven't even noticed?
Yeah, most of the times it's worse, these problems, because the Kurti government was heralded as anti-opposition government, which can be the game changer for the country, but most of the times they fell short from their promises. The mostly heralded thing or most celebrated move was to heighten the minimum wage, but because of this political deadlock, they face economic challenges, because according to Kosovo research institutions, the country lost more than 7 million completely euros from grants, and they also fell out from competing for more than 600 million euros. And this is a country which has wide wealth gap in Europe and with huge unemployment, so this is a really different position. And we can speak about Serbia, or I would say we need to speak about Serbia, because the Kurti government had really anti-Serb stance on foreign policy issues and regional issues, and this is why the United States and the European Union also announced sanctions on the Kurti government. So the mainstays of the, I would say, Kosovar foreign policy thinking, the good terms with the United States and the European Union, are basically lost or badly damaged. So they want more in place government with coalition, so they want to limit Kurti's influence on foreign policy decision makings, so they can uphold the status quo in the Western Balkans, in the Western power sense, I would say.
Yes, it was probably not a good campaign strategy for Kurti's government to focus so much on the Serbs and Serbian issue, because in the end it did not gather that much votes. At the end they fell short of gaining a one-party majority, and as you were saying, it damaged the relationship with Quint,
Yes.
with the powers that oversee the implementation of the agreement between Kosovo and Serbia. And it also, because after all, as you said, Serbs are minority in Kosovo. They have 10 seats reserved in the parliament currently, as 9 are won by Srpska Lista, the most popular Serbian party. And I don't think that it's also not a good situation for the Serbs, because there is agreement which is still yet to be implemented by Kosovo on the future of these Serbian minority regions. They are still waiting, and the situation is not too fantastic. I think that they have issues with schools which are run by the Serbian authorities. Healthcare is run by the Serbian authorities, while everything else is run by Kosovar authorities. They're sort of proxy system from Serbia and system from Kosovo at place at the same time. The mayors of municipalities are Albanians, because during the local elections the Serbs, they boycotted the elections, which was not a smart move on their part, because what happened, the Albanians, they won by a couple of seats. So it's a complex situation, but it has not spiraled out. I don't think there are any major issues ethnicity-wise or with its neighbors. The world is focused on other issues, and you said that the possible outcome, most likely, which would resolve this, to call an early elections, which can be called by the president. But isn't presidential elections like around the corner?
Yeah, the presidential elections will happen next year, and I think one of the reasons for this 54 unsuccessful run for Speaker of the House is the waiting game, because most of the parties, either in the government or in the opposition, are realized that either way they are going to lose votes or lose seats or lose influence if something happens, or if they form a government which is unfavorable for them or for their electorate. So this is why everybody waits, and because in the coming months there will be regional elections, and that's also can be a good measurement for the parties, how the electorate supporting them, how they are measured and how they are felt for an upcoming election also in the national level. So I think they need to seize this opportunity to work out a deal, because they have to break from this deadlock for the sake of the country, for the economy, and basically for the electorate, because Kosovo also faces a huge depopulation, either from the Serbs leaving the country or either for young educated Kosovars leaving the country because they fed up with the state of it and they want other opportunities basically in the Western European countries, mostly in Germany.
Yes, understandably. So probably parties are waiting and calculating how much will the local elections influence them, and they don't want to get any blame for anything. Why didn't the opposition parties form a government with the minority parties? Are the differences too big?
Yeah, most of the times differences are too big, and not just with the minority parties, mostly with the main opposition parties themselves, because they are easily fractured and most of the time they are riddled with infighting, even not in a coalition but among themselves, among their own institutions. So it's really hard to provide a working coalition, and upsetting the current government would mean at least 4 parties plus the minority parties with their own agenda. I think it wouldn't be achievable without Srpska lista, and that's a power for the Serbs to exploit, and I think everybody wants to avoid this situation.
Yes, and why didn't Kurti bring one opposition party in to form a coalition, or are the relationships so bad? Like you said, he was anti-opposition. The previous government was strongly anti-opposition, but I mean, in the end, politics is very often a game of flexibility. So why the inflexibility?
Yes, so he was trying to get a small opposition party involved in a Kurti-heavy government, but even the opposition party would like it because...
Which one?
The Social Democratic Party, which called NISMA, but even they are part of an electoral alliance which jointly has 8 seats, so they needed to break from it and then get on board with the other minority parties, excluding the Srpska lista, so it would be also a fractious coalition, and most of the times there was the problem with the current acting Minister of Justice, because her is picked out for the Speaker of the House position, but she is, as I said, widely disapproved, and even the politicians of NISMA are disapproving her, so they can end this situation when they are supporting Kurti, but they cannot support her nomination. So this is another deadlock.
Yes, and probably it would be a political suicide for the small opposition parties to join Kurti's government, which maybe would not survive in the end, and it would cost the party a lot of political power.
Yes, definitely, and we can see that Kurti doesn't like having coalition partners, because his first government, he entered the coalition with the Democratic League of Kosovo, and that coalition was broken up mostly from inside pressure from the United States only 50 days after it's entered power. So he doesn't have a good thinking of the current political elites of Kosovo and being in coalitions with them. So he doesn't want an uneven coalition or coalition on even numbers. He wants one he can dominate. So this is his main aim, I think, and this is also a step or a thing which slows down the negotiations.
It's difficult to manage your own internal politics, and moreover you have to keep track of what the external actors are saying. Well, it's not a unique case of Kosovo. There is Bosnia and Herzegovina, which has a higher representative, which influences the internal politics very, very much. Well, yeah, Balkans is quite a fractured place now. In Serbia, there are anti-government protests. Montenegro has stabilized somewhat since a couple of years ago when the government's survival rate was 3 months or a year, etc. Let's see what happens with Kosovo. I think Hungary recognized the independence of Kosovo, right?
Yeah, we were one of the first countries to recognize Kosovo's independence because in the Hungarian foreign policy thinking, supporting these kind of independence movements or self-recognitions can open up a way for the Hungarian minorities living in the neighboring countries. So in this regard, Hungary thought that its own national interests are in line with Kosovo's.
Yes, you would be surprised. Slovakia has very opposite line of thinking. We don't support declarations of independence unless it was agreed on by all parties involved.
Yeah,
we always use the precedent of Montenegro. We recognized Montenegro. Slovakia was one of the leading countries in the referendum leading up to the independence because it was agreed on by both parties, and there was a referendum which was recognized internationally, and 2 countries were created. And this was not the case of Kosovo. This is the argument we make why we do not recognize this one.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because you mentioned Montenegro, and when Hungary or even Montenegro recognized Kosovo, they risked the repercussions from Serbia. And so for Hungary, the lives or the livelihood of the Hungarian minority in Vojvodina was at stake. And when Montenegro recognized Kosovo, the Serbians said that's a knife from the back. So it was a crazy situation, and it's impacted the bilateral relations between Serbia and Hungary and Serbia and Montenegro as well. And most of the times for the worse in the Serbian perspective.
But it was short term. I think nowadays Serbia has a very good relationship with Hungary, and Hungarian minority in Serbia is enjoying just as strong as of an autonomy in Vojvodina as Slovak minority. They can learn their own language and keep their customs, etc. So I think the field is even today.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with the personal friendship of Orbán and Vučić, and also the deeper connections with Serbian visa-free travel. And also there was a historical committee which worked with the Hungarian and the Serbian state, and they disclosed all the finding on the debated parts of recent history. So that, I think, also played a big part on the friendship of Hungarian and Serbs. And most of the times it's really good to see that Serbians think Hungarians are friends, and they are also quite happy to move to Hungary for holidays, move Hungary for learning, or maybe even working. And I think that creates more opportunities to connect, more opportunities to get to know each other. And also it is what happened in the past. So Hungary always had a good relations with Serbian minority living in its territory. So it's really good to see that the Hungarian minority is getting the same treatment.
Yes, absolutely. And since I have a Balkans expert in front of me, take a wild guess. How do you see the future of Kosovo? Being part of the world community, UN member, independent, or the other way around, that things will not go so well and the movement for independence will somehow disappear, and 10 years down the line it will be an autonomous province of Serbia again, or join Greater Albania?
I would propose a third way because, these are the quite opposite scenarios you mentioned, but I think the recognition of Kosovo is stalling, so no more country is going to recognize Kosovo as an independent country in the near future. And also the Serbian lobby is going to block Kosovo's way in the international organizations, and this is why it will stay basically as it is. And also the Western Balkan politicians, I think, in every state, and most of the times also the Eastern great powers like Russia and China, and the Western great powers like the European Union and the United States, try to make Western Balkan as stable as possible, so anything can happen which is short of an armored conflict. So there will be no Greater Albania or Greater Serbia. This is my guess.
So thank you for your opinion. I very much agree. I mean, this is very educated guess, and I have to say I share it. I don't see Kosovo becoming a UN member in the near future. It will not get any more recognition out of the non-recognizers, and what is always most important is economic prosperity. Once there is economic prosperity, which is only down to the cleverness and resourcefulness of the Kosovo politicians and their experts, they can do whatever with those tools they have at their disposal. They would not need recognition if you have economic success. After all, it's secondary, or people will quickly change their mind because they want to be your partners after all.
Yes, and most of the times everything will come down to one thing which is needed at the most at this time, and it's a stable government, because a stable government can enact reforms, can improve the economy, can improve the livelihood of the electorate, so that is needed. And it's a really great question that we can see one in Kosovo or cannot, because the government needs to be either one party with Kurti or with a very interesting coalition setup, which is not a guarantee for a stable government, especially Kosovo.
I am not advisor to the prime minister or the president, but if I were, I would say go for it. I mean, form a unstable coalition, because it's a young country, it has its issues, and it's to learn pluralism. It needs to grow its political culture, and this is part of it. Working within coalitions, working somehow with the opposition when it comes to the important questions of amending constitution, and just not speaking to each other, not being on good terms just because, and country is suffering because of it in the end.
Yeah, but I'm devil's advocate here maybe, but Kosovo got independent in 2008, and that was 17 years ago, and we had 17 years to see that multi-party coalitions which are involving more than two parties are not working yet as it is in Kosovo, and even two-party coalitions cannot finish their runtime. So the most easy answer for me is Kurti one-party government or Kurti plus the minority parties. So it will be most achievable way to get a stable government, but even with this government, Kurti has to change his approach, and he also tried it, because in his acting capacity he agreed with very much what Donald Trump said most of the time, so he is willing to house illegal immigrants deported from the United States, for example, work with the United States in many ways, and this is a good sign for the Trump administration, because the Trump administration and Richard Grenell, who is the special envoy for special missions and the go-to guy for Balkan-related matters in the White House, has very many business interests in Serbia, so he is quite pro-Serb, and Kurti realized that he needs to change his approach to make amends, so to say, and make greater case for Kosovo.
Thank you for your input. It was very good and a very in-depth conversation we had about an ongoing topic, which is not like a headliner. Usually it's protests in Serbia or Ukraine, and really interesting stuff is happening in the Balkans all the time. That is why I have this podcast, Balkan Chronicles, to bring all the listeners the most interesting things that are happening there. So thank you, Árpád, again for coming to my podcast, and I hope this is not the last time, and we can do something else in the future.
Yes, I hope as well. Thank you.